The morning sun painted golden streaks across the playground of Rainbow Kids Daycare as Miss Joy, the owner, walked through her daily routine. She'd spent the last 10 years building this place from the ground up, turning it from a tiny home-based operation into the neighborhood's most trusted childcare center. Being one of the few black business owners in this upscale area hadn't always been easy, but her dedication had earned her a solid 5-star rating and a wait list of eager parents. Miss Joy, look what I made. Little Tommy came running up, holding a colorful paper airplane. His curly hair bounced with each step, and his eyes sparkled with excitement. She knelt down to his level, something she always did when talking to the children. "That's wonderful. Should we test it out?" she asked, her warm smile matching the brightness of the morning. Tommy nodded enthusiastically, and soon they were joined by a small crowd of curious preschoolers, all eager to watch the airplane's maiden flight. The playground was alive with the sound of children's laughter. Some were building castles in the sandbox, while others played hopscotch on the freshly painted concrete. Miss Joy had personally chosen every piece of equipment, from the rainbow-colored swing set to the mini basketball hoop that was just the right height for her little ones. "Higher, Miss Joy, higher," called out Lily from the swings, her pigtails swishing through the air. Miss Joy checked that Lily was securely seated before giving her another gentle push. Safety always came first at Rainbow Kids, something the parents particularly appreciated. As she moved between different groups of playing children, Miss Joy noticed movement across the street. A woman she hadn't seen before was standing on her front lawn, phone in hand, watching the daycare intently. The woman's expression was hard to read, but something about her stance made Miss Joy uneasy. "Time for our morning song," Miss Joy called out, trying to shake off the odd feeling. The children gathered around her, forming their usual wonky circle. They'd been practicing "If You're Happy and You Know It" all week, complete with silly dance moves that had them giggling nonstop. Just as they were getting to the part about stomping their feet, Miss Joy noticed the woman was now taking pictures. She'd moved closer to the daycare's white picket fence, barely trying to hide what she was doing. A few of the older children noticed too, their singing faltering as they watched the stranger. "Keep going, sweethearts," Miss Joy encouraged, her voice steady despite her growing concern. She'd dealt with nosy neighbors before, but something felt different this time. Still, she kept her focus on the children, leading them through their favorite verses while discreetly watching the woman from the corner of her eye. The morning routine continued as planned. After their songs, it was time for outdoor learning. Today's lesson was about butterflies, inspired by the garden they planted together last month. Miss Joy had brought out picture books and craft supplies, setting up a cozy area under the big oak tree that provided perfect shade for their activities. "Look, Miss Joy, a real butterfly," squealed Amy, pointing to an orange monarch that had landed on their butterfly bush. The children watched in amazed silence as it fluttered its wings, providing a perfect real-life example for their lesson. But the peaceful moment was short-lived. The sound of a gate creaking open caught Miss Joy's attention. The woman from across the street had entered the playground area, her phone now held up like a shield in front of her. Miss Joy could feel her heart beating faster, but years of experience had taught her how to stay calm in tense situations. "Good morning," Miss Joy said pleasantly, standing up while keeping one hand reassuringly on little Amy's shoulder. "Can I help you with something?" The woman's response would mark the beginning of an incident that would soon turn this ordinary morning into something none of them expected. The children, still gathered around their butterfly books, watched with curious eyes as their beloved teacher faced what was about to become much more than a simple neighborhood dispute. The woman marched across the playground, her heels clicking against the concrete path. Her designer handbag swung from one arm while she held her phone steadily pointed at Miss Joy with the other. The children's butterfly lesson forgotten, all eyes were now on this unexpected visitor. "What exactly do you think you're doing with these children?" the woman demanded, her voice sharp enough to make little Amy grip Miss Joy's hand tighter. The woman wore an expression that seemed to say she owned the whole neighborhood. Miss Joy took a calm breath, using the same steady voice she used when handling toddler tantrums. "Ma'am, I'm the owner of Rainbow Kids Daycare. These children are in my care for the day. Is there something specific I can help you with?" The woman scoffed, her perfectly manicured fingers tightening around her phone. "Owner? Really? I've been watching you all morning. I know what I saw, and I'm not comfortable with it. I've already called the police." Several of the older children gasped. Tommy dropped his paper airplane, and Lily scrambled down from the swing to huddle closer to Miss Joy. The butterfly they'd been admiring earlier fluttered away, startled by the commotion. "Miss Joy," whispered Emmy, confusion and worry clear in her small voice. "Did we do something wrong?" "No, sweetheart," Miss Joy assured her, keeping her voice gentle but firm. "Everything is fine. Let's all go sit by the oak tree and continue our butterfly drawings." She turned to address her assistant teacher, who had been watching from near the sandbox. "Miss Beth, could you please gather the children?" But the woman wasn't finished. She stepped closer, waving her phone like a weapon. "Don't move. The police are on their way. I've got everything on video. I've lived in this neighborhood for 3 weeks, and I've never seen you before. How do we know you're really supposed to be here?" Miss Joy felt her chest tighten, but years of dealing with difficult situations helped her maintain her composure. She gestured toward the large, professionally painted sign that read Rainbow Kids Daycare, licensed and insured, hanging prominently on the building wall. "Ma'am, as you can see, this is a licensed daycare facility. I've owned and operated it for 10 years. All our paperwork is in order, and the parents of these children have entrusted them to our care. I'm happy to show you my credentials, but I need you to lower your voice as you're frightening the children." The woman's face flushed red. "Don't tell me what to do. I'm protecting these children. This is a nice neighborhood, and something just doesn't look right about this situation." Miss Joy felt the weight of those words she'd heard before in different forms over the years. She noticed little Tommy's bottom lip starting to quiver and knew she needed to handle this situation carefully, not just for herself, but for the children watching and learning from every moment. "Children," she called out with a warm smile, "who remembers our song about being brave?" Several small hands shot up, momentarily distracted from the tension. "Why don't we sing it together while we wait for our visitors?" The woman's eyes widened in disbelief as Miss Joy began leading the children in a cheerful song about courage and kindness. Some parents arriving for early pickup stopped at the gate, sensing something was wrong. Mrs. Chen, whose daughter Lucy attended the daycare, immediately pulled out her phone and started recording the scene. "Miss Joy," one of the kids called out between verses, "the police are here." 2 patrol cars had pulled up to the curb, their lights off. A small mercy that Miss Joy appreciated. As the officers approached the playground gate, the woman rushed toward them, her phone still recording. "Finally, officers, I'm so glad you're here. I caught this whole thing on video. These children." "Good morning, Miss Joy," one of the officers called out, cutting off the woman mid-sentence. "Having a nice day with the kids?" The woman's mouth dropped open as she realized this situation might not play out exactly as she'd planned. The children, still gathered around their beloved teacher, watched with curious eyes as the scene began to unfold in an unexpected way. Miss Joy smiled warmly at the officers, recognizing Officer Pate, whose own son had graduated from Rainbow Kids just last year. "Good morning, officers. We were just having our butterfly lesson before this unexpected interruption. Would you like to see the children's drawings?" The woman's face began to shift from righteous anger to confusion as she looked back and forth between the officers and Miss Joy. The morning sun continued to shine brightly overhead, and somewhere in the distance, that same monarch butterfly had returned to the garden, unaware of the drama unfolding in its peaceful playground home. Officer Pate approached the playground area with his partner, Officer Chen, both maintaining a calm and friendly demeanor that helped keep the children at ease. The woman who'd called them was still clutching her phone, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled from all the excitement. "Officers, I've been recording everything," she insisted, trying to show them her phone screen. "I saw these children with this woman, and something just didn't seem right. I'm new to the neighborhood, and I'm just trying to keep it safe." Officer Chen shared a knowing look with his partner before addressing the woman. "Ma'am, could you please lower your voice? We can hear you just fine." He turned to Miss Joy with a warm smile. "How are the kids doing today? I heard there was a butterfly lesson happening." The woman's jaw dropped even further. "Wait, you know her?" "Of course they know me," Miss Joy replied gently. "Rainbow Kids Daycare has been part of this community for a decade. In fact, Officer Pete's son Danny was one of our star graduates last year. Remember the graduation ceremony, officer? He did such a wonderful job leading the alphabet song. Officer Pete chuckled. He still sings it at home. My wife can't get him to stop. More parents had gathered at the gate now, watching the scene unfold. Mrs. Chen was still recording everything on her phone, while Mr. Rodriguez, a local teacher whose twins attended the daycare, stepped forward to speak with the officers. Miss Joy is the heart of this neighborhood, he said firmly. My girls have been coming here for 2 years, and I've never seen a more dedicated educator. The woman's face had begun to pale, her phone lowering slightly as she looked around at the gathering crowd of supportive parents. Little Tommy, who had been watching everything with wide eyes, suddenly spoke up. Miss Joy teaches us to be kind to everyone, he announced proudly. Even when they're not kind to us? Several other children nodded in agreement, making some of the parents smile despite the tension. Officer Chen pulled out his notepad, though it was more for show than necessity. Ma'am, would you like to see the daycare's credentials? Though I can personally vouch for Miss Joy's outstanding reputation in our community. I was just trying to be careful, the woman stammered, her earlier confidence deflating. You hear so many stories these days. You're right about being careful, Miss Joy said kindly, surprising everyone with her gentle tone. But being careful doesn't mean making assumptions about people. Would you like to come see our butterfly garden? The children have been working on it for weeks. Little Amy tugged at Miss Joy's sleeve. Can't we show her our drawings too? The woman looked increasingly uncomfortable, shifting her designer bag from one arm to the other. The phone that had been recording everything was now hanging limply at her side. Officer Pete decided it was time to wrap things up officially. Well, Miss Joy, looks like everything's in order here, as usual, he said cheerfully. Maybe we could get a quick look at those butterfly drawings before we head out. My Danny would be jealous if he knew I got to see them. The children excitedly gathered their artwork, momentarily forgetting the drama as they proudly showed their colorful creations to the officers. The woman stood awkwardly to the side, watching as Miss Joy knelt down beside each child, praising their work and encouraging them to explain their drawings to the officers. Mrs. Chen, still by the gate, called out, Miss Joy, should we postpone the parent committee meeting this afternoon? Not at all, Miss Joy replied with her characteristic warmth. We'll have it as planned. In fact, she turned to the woman who'd caused all the commotion. You're welcome to join us. We're always looking for new community members to get involved properly with our daycare family. The woman's face flushed red again, but this time from embarrassment rather than anger. The morning sun had risen fully now, casting short shadows across the playground as the butterfly lesson turned into an impromptu community gathering. Several parents were now chatting with the officers, while others had come inside the playground to help settle the children back into their regular activities. Officer Chen made a few final notes before closing his notepad. Miss Joy, thank you for handling this situation so professionally. It's educators like you who make our community stronger. He turned to address the woman. Ma'am, do you have any other concerns we need to address? The woman shook her head, clutching her designer bag close to her chest. The phone that had seemed so important earlier was now tucked away, and her eyes kept darting between the supportive parents and the children happily returning to their butterfly drawings. Little Lucy, who had been quietly observing everything, suddenly appeared with a bright yellow drawing. I made this for you, she said, holding it out to the woman. It's a butterfly. Miss Joy says butterflies remind us that beautiful changes can happen any time. The simple wisdom of a child's words hung in the air, leaving everyone to reflect on how a morning that started with suspicion could transform into something quite different indeed. As the morning's tension began to settle, Miss Joy decided it was time to show exactly why Rainbow Kids Daycare had become such a beloved part of the community. With the officers still present and parents gathering around, she opened her office door and gestured for everyone to follow. Since we're all here, she said with a gentle smile, let me show you what makes our little daycare special. The woman who'd called the police hesitated but found herself being swept along by the group's movement. The office walls were covered with framed certificates, licenses, and children's artwork. A large corkboard displayed photos of graduating classes over the years, showing hundreds of smiling faces. Below each photo were handwritten notes from parents, telling stories of how Rainbow Kids had touched their lives. 10 years ago, Miss Joy began, pulling out a thick binder of credentials. I started this daycare with just 3 children in my home. Today, we're rated as one of the top childcare facilities in the district. She opened the binder, revealing pristine inspection reports, teaching certifications, and numerous awards. The woman's face grew increasingly flushed as she scanned the walls. Her eyes landed on a recent newspaper article featuring Miss Joy receiving a Community Leadership Award. I didn't know, she stammered, her designer bag now clutched tightly against her chest. Just then, a commotion at the front door announced the arrival of more parents for the regular pickup time. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose twins had been at Rainbow Kids since they were toddlers, burst in with tears in her eyes. Miss Joy, I just got the video from Mrs. Chen. I can't believe this happened. She turned to face the woman who'd caused the incident. Do you have any idea what Miss Joy means to this community? Before the situation could escalate, Miss Joy stepped forward. Let's remember what we teach the children about handling difficult moments, she said calmly. Sometimes the best response is to learn from our mistakes and grow together. Little Tommy poked his head into the office. Miss Joy, can we show everyone our garden? The butterflies came back. The timing couldn't have been better. Miss Joy led the group outside to the butterfly garden, a project that perfectly demonstrated the daycare's approach to learning and community. Each plant had been chosen and planted by the children, with help from local master gardeners who volunteered their time. Every child here helps tend this garden, Miss Joy explained, watching as monarchs and swallowtails danced among the flowers. They learn about responsibility, patience, and how beautiful things take time to grow. Officer Pete, who had stayed to ensure everything remained calm, nodded appreciatively. My Danny still talks about the sunflower he grew here last year. It was taller than me. As if on cue, a group of middle school students walked by the fence. Hi, Miss Joy. They called out cheerfully. We still miss your story time. The woman watched this interaction with growing understanding. Her phone, which had earlier been her weapon of choice, now felt heavy in her hand. She glanced at the video she'd recorded, seeing it through new eyes, eyes that now recognized her own prejudices. These achievement records are impressive, Officer Chen commented, flipping through the binder Miss Joy had brought outside. Perfect scores on every safety inspection, advanced certification in early childhood education, and, wait, didn't you win Educator of the Year last spring? Miss Joy nodded modestly. The children did all the work. I just provided the space for them to shine. More parents had arrived, and the playground was filling with the usual afternoon pickup excitement. Children ran to greet their parents, proudly showing off their butterfly drawings and chattering about the morning's excitement. My daughter was on the waiting list for 6 months, one father mentioned, watching his little girl on the swings. Best wait we ever had. She's learned more here in 1 year than we could have imagined. The woman who'd called the police stood quietly, taking in all these revelations. The community's response, the wall of achievements, the happy children, and most importantly, Miss Joy's graceful handling of the entire situation, it all painted a picture very different from the one she'd imagined that morning. The parent committee meeting is starting soon, Miss Joy announced, checking her watch. Everyone is welcome to join us. We're discussing our upcoming cultural heritage celebration. She looked directly at the woman, extending an olive branch. Fresh perspectives are always valuable. A butterfly landed on the fence near where they stood, its wings slowly opening and closing in the afternoon sun. The woman watched it, remembering little Lucy's words about beautiful changes happening at any time. The evidence of her mistake was overwhelming, but so was the opportunity to make things right. The playground buzzed with activity as parents chatted, children played, and the day continued its normal rhythm. The incident that had threatened to divide had instead revealed the strong bonds of a community built on understanding, education, and acceptance. Miss Joy's daycare wasn't just a business, it was a cornerstone of the neighborhood, nurturing not only children, but also the values that made their community strong. By the next morning, the story of what happened at Rainbow Kids Daycare had spread throughout the neighborhood like wildfire. Mrs. Chen's video had made its way to local community groups, sparking intense discussions about prejudice and quick judgments. But what happened next surprised everyone. The morning started with a steady stream of deliveries to the daycare, flowers, cards, and small gifts from neighbors, many of whom didn't even have children at the center. Each delivery came with notes of support and appreciation for Miss Joy's grace under pressure. "Look at all the flowers!" little Emmy exclaimed as she arrived with her mom. "It looks like a bigger butterfly garden inside." The front office had indeed transformed into a makeshift flower shop with bouquets covering every available surface. Miss Joy maintained her usual calm demeanor, but her eyes glistened with emotion as she read each heartfelt message. One card particularly touched her. It was from an elderly couple who lived down the street. "We've watched you build this daycare from nothing," they wrote. "You've brought more light to this neighborhood than any other business ever has." The local coffee shop owner stopped by with breakfast for all the staff. "After what happened yesterday," he said, setting down boxes of fresh pastries, "we wanted you to know how much this community values you." But it wasn't just the immediate neighborhood that responded. A local news van pulled up around mid-morning. The reporter, a young woman with kind eyes, approached Miss Joy during the children's outdoor playtime. "We've received dozens of calls about what happened here," the reporter explained. "But they're not calling to complain about the incident. They're calling to tell us about the amazing work you do here. Would you be willing to share your story?" Miss Joy thought carefully before responding. "I'll speak with you," she agreed, "but only if we can focus on the positive changes this incident might bring about. These children are watching and learning from how we handle difficult situations." The interview took place in the butterfly garden, where the morning's excitement had drawn even more butterflies than usual. The children watched in fascination as the camera crew set up their equipment, with little Tommy proudly explaining to everyone how TV cameras worked. "What makes Rainbow Kids special," Miss Joy told the reporter, "is not just what we teach the children, but what they teach us. They show us every day how to approach the world with openness and curiosity instead of fear and judgment." As she spoke, parents began arriving for a hastily organized community meeting. The turnout was unprecedented, not just current parents, but former students, neighbors, and even business owners from around the area. The woman from yesterday's incident was notably absent, but her next-door neighbor attended, carrying an apologetic note from her. "She's too embarrassed to come herself today," the neighbor explained, handing over the envelope. "But she wanted you to know she's deeply sorry." The meeting turned into something much bigger than anyone expected. Parents shared stories about how Rainbow Kids had impacted their families. Mr. Rodriguez, the local teacher, spoke about how the daycare had helped his twins overcome their shyness. Mrs. Chen's daughter, now in middle school, talked about how Miss Joy had inspired her to want to become a teacher herself. "My kid couldn't read when he came here," one father said, his voice thick with emotion. "Miss Joy didn't just teach him his ABCs, she taught him to love learning. Now he's reading chapter books in first grade." The local newspaper editor, who'd caught wind of the gathering, sat in the back taking notes. His teenage daughter had been one of Miss Joy's first students, and he wanted to ensure the story was told right. As the meeting continued, parents began proposing ideas for positive change. They suggested cultural awareness workshops, community gatherings, and more events to bring the neighborhood together. Miss Joy listened to each suggestion, a heart full at seeing how this challenging incident had sparked such a powerful response. "You know what's really amazing?" Mrs. Rodriguez whispered to another parent. "Miss Joy could have gotten angry, could have made this into something ugly. Instead, she showed everyone what real leadership looks like." The children, picking up on the special atmosphere of the day, were extra gentle with each other during playtime. Little Lucy offered to share her favorite doll with a new student who seemed shy. Tommy helped Emmy when she struggled with her shoelaces. It was as if they were all trying to show the grown-ups how simple kindness could be. By afternoon, local businesses had started calling. The bookstore owner wanted to donate books for the daycare's reading corner. The ice cream shop offered to host a community get-together. Even the mayor's office reached out, interested in recognizing Rainbow Kids Daycare for its positive influence on the community. "Miss Joy," little Emmy asked as the exciting day drew to a close, "why did all these people bring us flowers?" Miss Joy knelt down to her level, just as she always did. "Sometimes, sweetie, when people see something unfair happen, they want to show that they care. These flowers are their way of saying that love is stronger than misunderstanding." As parents came for pickup, many lingered longer than usual, chatting and making plans for future community events. The butterfly garden had never seen so many visitors, and the monarchs seemed to dance more enthusiastically than ever among the flowers. The incident that could have divided the community had instead revealed its strength. Rainbow Kids Daycare had always been more than just a childcare center. It was a place where important life lessons were learned, not just by children, but by everyone who walked through its doors. A month had passed since the incident at Rainbow Kids Daycare, and the neighborhood had changed in subtle but meaningful ways. The morning sun still painted golden streaks across the playground, but now it illuminated something new. A beautiful community bulletin board near the entrance, filled with photos and events that celebrated the neighborhood's diversity. Miss Joy was arranging craft supplies for the day's activities when she heard a hesitant knock at the door. Standing there, looking nervous but determined, was the woman from that memorable morning, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a young woman in her mid-20s, clutching a portfolio and wearing a hopeful expression. "Good morning," the older woman said softly, quite different from her confrontational tone a month ago. "This is my daughter Rose. She's a certified early childhood teacher, and she saw your job posting." Miss Joy welcomed them both inside, noticing how the woman's eyes darted to the wall of achievements she dismissed so quickly before. Rose stepped forward, her enthusiasm evident despite her nervousness. "I've heard so much about your program," Rose said, especially after what happened. "The way you handled that situation, that's the kind of teacher I want to be." The irony of the moment wasn't lost on anyone. The mother who had once called the police on Miss Joy was now here supporting her daughter's dream of working at the very same daycare. But Miss Joy saw something valuable in this moment, a chance to show how real change happens. "Let's sit down and talk," Miss Joy suggested, leading them to the cozy reading corner. "Tell me about your experience with children." As Rose shared her story, little Tommy peeked in from the playground. "Miss Joy, the butterflies are doing the dancing thing again." His eyes widened when he recognized the woman, but instead of fear, he showed the pure acceptance that only children can master. "Want to see the butterflies? They're not scary at all." The woman blinked back tears at the child's innocent invitation. "I'd love to see them," she managed to say. The butterfly garden had flourished over the past month. What started as a simple learning project had grown into a community gathering spot. Parents often lingered there during pickup time, chatting and getting to know each other. The garden now included plants donated by neighbors, each one adding to the tapestry of colors that attracted dozens of butterflies. "We're starting a new program," Miss Joy explained as they watched the butterflies. "Every Friday, we invite different community members to share their stories with the children. Last week, Mrs. Chen taught us about Chinese New Year. This week, Mr. Rodriguez is going to teach the kids some Spanish songs." Rose's eyes lit up. "That's exactly the kind of inclusive teaching I want to do." She pulled out photos from her student teaching experience, showing creative projects she'd developed to help children learn about different cultures. The mother stood quietly, watching her daughter's enthusiasm. Finally, she spoke up. "I owe you an apology, Miss Joy. A real one, not just a note. I let my prejudices cloud my judgment, and I could have caused real harm. Seeing how you turned my mistake into a lesson in kindness, it changed me. It changed our whole family's discussions about bias and assumptions." Miss Joy smiled warmly. "Sometimes the best lessons come from our hardest moments." She turned to Rose. "When can you start?" The young woman's face broke into a huge smile. "Really? You mean it?" "We're having our monthly community potluck this Saturday," Miss Joy said. "It would be a perfect time to meet everyone. Both of you should come." Just then, little Annie came running up with a drawing. "Look what I made. It's all of us in the butterfly garden." The picture showed a crowd of smiling stick figures surrounded by butterflies, all different colors mixed together. The Saturday potluck was the biggest one yet. Tables groaned under the weight of dishes from every culture represented in the neighborhood. Rose hit it off immediately with the other teachers, her fresh ideas and genuine enthusiasm winning everyone over. Her mother, though quieter, made a point of talking to each parent, listening to their stories with new understanding. The children put on a special performance, a song about butterflies and friendship that they'd been practicing all week. As their sweet voices filled the air, Miss Joy looked around at the gathered community. There was Officer Pete, who'd handled that tense morning with such wisdom, Mrs. Chen, whose video had sparked important conversations about prejudice, Mr. Rodriguez, teaching a group of kids a Spanish counting game, and now Rose, already on the floor with the children, naturally fitting into the Rainbow Kids family. Miss Joy, little Lucy tugged at her sleeve. "Can we put more chairs in the reading corner?" Rose promised to read us a story about a caterpillar who learns not to judge other bugs by how they look. The butterfly garden had grown again. Someone had added wind chimes that tinkled softly in the breeze, and the local artist had painted a beautiful mural on the fence. The message was simple but powerful. In our garden, everyone can grow. As the sun began to set on another day at Rainbow Kids Daycare, Miss Joy watched Rose leading her first story time. The woman who had once called the police now sat among the parents, listening as her daughter read about acceptance and transformation. Outside, the butterflies danced among the flowers, their wings catching the last rays of sunlight, reminding everyone that the most beautiful changes often come from the most unexpected beginnings.